I'm talking about a person that's been locked up multiple times, throughout my life. Had no education. I was the bottom of the barrel junkie, as you would call it. I was a person that stole, a person that robbed people. I was a person that used needles, snorted, smoked, whatever I could do to get more drugs. I went to any length. But there was something about a day I want to tell you about that. I laid on Johnny Lytle Avenue in the backyard of a house in the mud on a rainy day. And I cried out to something. I didn't know what that something was, but I said, I need help. I want people to know that when they go get help, it's not nobody that's helping them. It's God that's helping them. We're just vessels. We're just messengers. God does the miracles. Makes me cry. That man had to endure what he did to save my life. If I was the only person on earth, he'd have did it for me. And he'll do it for you too. My name is Matt Chafin, and I'm a person that lives in long-term recovery from substance abuse. As of now, I currently work at Cider Paint Valley Mental Health Center as a treatment coordinator at the Men's Recovery House in Circleville, Ohio. I coordinate treatment. I help men get to different treatment centers. I counsel men, I do case management with men, and I do group therapy to help men defeat substance abuse and the disease of addiction. I come from a dark, dark place of substance abuse. It was the darkest time of my life. Suicidal ideations, depression, loneliness, isolation, and degradation became my life. The disease of addiction took me from marijuana all the way to the lengths of heroin, of opiate use, and an IV syringe. It took me to jails, institutions, and spiritual death. I was not a believer in Christ. I was not a believer in nothing. I believed in, I guess you could say, a destructive higher power, a destructive power that was ruining my life, and I thought that would be my life, my whole life. I was in the bondage of self, imprisoned in my own mind, thinking that I couldn't be nothing but a drug addict. And that's what I was going to be. But Christ set me free. When I finally became open to something greater than me and started attending church and 12-step meetings, I was able to understand that the fight started in my mind. And if I could change my mind, I could change my heart. And if I could change my heart, I could change my actions. Christ taught me to walk different, talk different, and treat people different. I lived a life full of violence, and he made me kind. See, I believe in an open heart surgery that has to be done only by Jesus Christ. Nothing else can give you the peace of all understanding when he is involved. And I learned that through some time in recovery. Recovery has taught me a lot about myself. Jesus Christ introduced me to me. And I never thought it was ever possible for me to be able to help someone, let alone live in my own home and have a wife and friends and a car and a license. I never thought none of that was feasible to me. But Christ has done a lot more than that. But I wasn't asking for prayers of getting stuff. I didn't care about the stuff. I wanted freedom. And I wanted freedom from active addiction. I wanted freedom from the horrors of addiction, from the nightmare that I was living for over 20 years and was stuck and didn't know how to get out. So Christ is my Lord and Savior. And that's what I think saved my life. That's what I know saved my life. Growing up as a child, it was a little different for me. I had both my parents. We had what we needed, not always what we wanted. I lived in a poverty-stricken town, Springfield, Ohio. Violence was very normal. Theft was very normal. Robbery was very normal. I went to Springfield South High, which wasn't the greatest of schools when I grew up. Grew up more in a black community. Back in the 90s, it was a little different then than it is now. And I had to fight for my respect. I had to be tough. I wasn't allowed to cry much in the house. What was done in the house wasn't said outside of the house. You know, I experienced a lot of domestic violence between my mom and dad when they drank. As I grew older, my dad quit drinking, and he was sober for 15 years, I think, before he died. I was running with the wrong people. I didn't think I was smart. I had a hard time reading. I had a hard time writing. I had a hard time spelling. I knew something was wrong with me long before I ever picked up the drugs. I knew I had mental health issues way before I picked up the drugs, but when I was a kid, that wasn't talked about. We didn't talk about mental health. We didn't talk about substance abuse. We didn't do that stuff in school, and they didn't teach us that stuff. And I believe now that, you know, that needs to be more talked about in schools, even at a young age. But I knew something was wrong with me, and I didn't know what it was. I just wanted to fit in with the other kids, other people. I wanted to be popular. I was the fat kid when I was young, and I grew up and I started to be violent, and that gave me respect. And I felt like I fit in as long as I could fight and harm people. They would be more afraid of me, like power and respect. And I was being misinformed by misinformed people. Growing up, it was a little different because my dad attended church and my mother was completely against it. And whatever my mom said is what I did, because like she was like the power of the house. And but my dad continued to go to church regardless, and he used to say things to me, and I didn't know he was talking about the Bible when he was saying things, but he was. But I thought he was just a dumb old man that didn't know nothing. I did it my way for a long time. And at a young age, I dropped out of school. I was 17, I turned 18 years old, and I dropped out of school. It's one of the biggest regrets of my life. But this is the thing, like what God can do and transform a person, man. Like, I'm talking about a person that's been locked up multiple times, you know, throughout my life. Had no education. I was the bottom of the barrel junkie, as you would call it. I was a person that stole, a person that robbed people. I was a person that used needles, snorted, smoked, whatever I could do to get more drugs. I went to any length. But there was something about a day I want to tell you about that. I laid on Johnny Lotto Avenue in the backyard of a house in the mud on a rainy day. And I cried out to something. I didn't know what that something was, but I said, I need help. And I don't know what it is, but I'll just do whatever it takes to get out of what I'm in right now. The bondage, man, of addiction. And I cried, and I was in the fetal position, crying. Now, that's not the last time that I used. The next day was the last day I used. The last day I used was April 3rd of 2018. And the reason I'm saying this is because I don't really like to stay in the problem. Let's talk about the solution. I kind of told you, I kind of identified that I messed up, and I messed up a lot. And I definitely didn't follow God. I was an instrument of the devil for a long time. But when I cried out to this thing, I didn't know what this thing was. And the next day, it was my girlfriend at the time, called and asked if I needed help. And I said yes. And I got to Chillicothe in 2018 on April 4th, which was my last use of drugs. And there was a guy named Jamar Harris. He owns a barber shop here in town, and I met with him, and he called Pastor Gray, and Pastor Gray said it sounds like he needs inpatient, and Jamar found me an inpatient. I went to inpatient down in Portsmouth, Ohio, TCC. And while I was there, man, I was still acting out. Like I didn't know I didn't know how to be righteous. I didn't know how to be holy. I didn't know how to, none of that stuff. I wasn't learning none of that stuff. They was teaching me secular things, coping skills, which do help, meditation and breathing. And they're teaching me stuff and 12-step skills and coping skills. And they're introducing me to 12-step meetings and introducing me to support people to help me along the way, and I completed that, and I still didn't know God. And I had about 4 or 5 months in recovery, and I come back to Chillicothe and came to a place called ACM, Another Chance Ministries. Big place now, a lot of clients. It's grew really big. There was, I think there was 12 of us when I was at ACM, and I think they got over 100 now. And they didn't care if you had insurance. They didn't care about none of that stuff. They cared about how they could help. And I interviewed with them, and I'm just telling you this because if you think about Paul walking Damascus Road, this story relates to that with me. I was at my girlfriend's, at the time, mother's house, and you had to interview for the ACM, and I looked up to where the address was, and it was a 8-minute drive. So I was like, that's probably about an hour walk, and I took off walking down this road, not knowing where I was going, not knowing where I was headed. I just know I needed somewhere to sleep, that I needed some more help, that I needed some more of something. And I didn't want to live like that no more. So I was willing to go to any lengths to stay clean. So I started walking down Western Avenue, and I walked all the way to Zion Baptist Church out on Clinton Road. And it was a long walk, and I interviewed, and they asked me why I wanted to come to this place, and I said I need a place to sleep. And it was a faith-based treatment center. So I had to stay another week with my mother-in-law, or not my mother-in-law, but my girlfriend's mother. And they accepted me into the program with me not knowing God at all, actually being atheist. Very demonic person, very angry, mad at the world, mad at my mistakes, mad at my sin, like Dre would say. But I didn't want to do it no more. I wanted to find something different. I keep on saying because I was searching for something different, but I didn't know what it was. And the thing is I get to this place and people were trying to help me with my bags, and I don't want nobody to help me. People were hugging me, and I didn't want nobody to hug me because I didn't deserve love of the things I've done in the past. But I continued to stay clean. I didn't use no matter what happened. I didn't pick up no dope. And I was told if I don't pick up dope that great things will happen, that miracles will happen. And I just didn't believe that. I didn't feed into it. But during this program, you had to go to church. You had to go to church at Zion Baptist Church. And Pastor Troy Gray, he was the pastor. And I remember my first time, and I'm actually sitting in the room right now, and it's just great. I got saved on that altar right behind me. And Pastor Gray was preaching. I thought, this is crazy. I don't know how this is going to work for me. Maybe I just need to go back to what I was doing. Maybe that's what it was meant for me. But I stayed. I stayed. And I stayed. And I was going to a 12-step fellowship, and we work steps at a 12-step fellowship, and we get support people, and these steps ask you questions, and still attending church. And I remember pastor preached a sermon on being incarcerated, and if you had ever been incarcerated, that you needed to come up to the altar. And I remember that day, and I wanted to go up to the altar that day, but it felt like there was a seatbelt on me and I couldn't get up. And I was like, feels different. Why can't I get up? And I wanted to get up with the rest of the people, but I couldn't get up. And today I know that was the enemy. It was the devil. It was Lucifer. But he was trying to keep me trapped. That he wanted me to stay on his path and not the righteous path. Not to follow the truth in the life of Jesus Christ. And I kept staying. I kept going. These guys that I was around, they would encourage me. The church I came to, there was a lady named Polly, and every time they would do that thing where you get up and you greet somebody and give them a hug or a high five, and she would always find me and give me a hug. I would try to run from her. I would go to the bathroom during that time, but she would still wait on me and she would still give me a hug. And Miss Diana was another one that did the same thing. And these people, I didn't understand why they was doing this, and I didn't understand why the church was helping us eat and putting beds in rooms for us to sleep and paying the heat and the electric for us to be in these houses. I didn't understand it, and because nobody ever helps you where I come from. Everybody wants something from you. And I had an infection in my elbow, and I was going to the doctor, and I got put in a nursing home for 6 weeks. And the first person that came and visited me in that nursing home was Timmy Stacy. And he brought me a pack of cigarettes, a bag of McDonald's, and a Bible. I believe I was saved that next day. I talked to God for the first time, and I gave him my ultimatum. And I said, this is the only chance you got with me. If it don't happen now, I'm going back to the way I was living. And I opened the Bible that Timmy Stacy gave me, and I started to read, and it captured my mind. I had so much interest because I was reading parts that God wanted me to read, because I didn't know what to read. I didn't know to read front or back, or I didn't know how to read the Bible, and I was just opening and reading things. And the first book I ever wrote was Romans, and the first person disciple I ever wrote about, apostle, was Apostle Paul. And I read about all the things that he had done and that he was able to be saved. And I said, maybe I can be saved. And I think I was saved that day, but I went to the altar the following Sunday, right back behind me. And so it didn't change right away, but I felt something loose off me. I felt a little bit of freedom. Pastor Gray prayed for me because he knew I was demonic. And from that day, my life changed. My life changed. I began to serve the Lord. I got involved in street ministries, and I started to pray with people. I learned how to pray, man. I learned how to talk to God in my own specific way. When I talk to God, I don't have all these flowery words. I just ask God for help, and I talk to him just like he's my friend, because I call him my bro, like that's my bro. And he's been with me for a long time. I didn't even know this, man, for a long time. But now that I know God and he's done that open heart surgery on me, I'm able to look at a different lens out of my eyes, man. I call them God eyes. And I'm able to look through God eyes instead of my own eyes. And I look back over the years how he saved me and put me in institutions, which was actually the belly of the whale that was saving me, and he put me in rehabs, and he was showing me all these signs, and I go on with my walk, and I'm coming up on a year of clean time, man, I'm feeling good. I've been clean for a year. I ain't used drugs for a year or alcohol. You know, I'm getting my health back intact, and I'm going to church and I'm loving it. And I got baptized. Oh man, Pastor Gray baptized me. That was October. It was around my birthday of 2019. And then I went on to complete the program at ACM. So I worked at Bob Evans, and I thought that was going to be my life, you know. I was clean, and I worked at Bob Evans, and I was okay with that. I was okay because I had a little bit of freedom from active addiction. I had a little bit of freedom from the horrors that I experienced over 20 years. I had freedom from not having handcuffs on me. You know, I had freedom from living in a warm house, man. I had my own apartment, and I got my license, and I got a car, and I was working at Bob Evans, and it's just a great feeling, you know, to be able to live life on life's terms without the use of drugs. You know, not have to worry about where I'm going to get my next dollar to get my next hit or to get my next shot. You know, I didn't have to worry about that no more. And see, with God, it has to be a relationship with God. And I started to learn that. You know, I started to learn that praise is a lot different than worship. You know, I can praise God, but can I worship God? And nothing else, man. Know that God is the ultimate one. That He's the Alpha, the Omega. You know, He's the bridge over troubled water. That He's the diamond in the rough. That He's the one to lean on in troubled times. Can I understand that? Because my life started to get better, and I met a woman, and she's my wife, Molly Chafin. I love her to death. I met this woman, and she's one of the most spiritual, loving, tender women I've ever met in my life, and she loved me. And I didn't understand that because I didn't understand love. I didn't understand the love of Christ. I didn't understand it. I was early in my walk. You know, you're thinking 2018, we're 2025. I got almost 7 years clean now. And through walking this walk, I never thought what is possible now was possible then. That my lost dreams were awakening and my new possibilities were arising, right? Like I thought I was going to be a cook at Bob Evans the rest of my life and just live clean and serve God from there. And I would have been fine with that because God didn't have to bless me with no more. All He had to do is bless me with not using drugs no more. I'm talking about taking the disease and the taste of drugs right out of my mouth, man. Like not having to use drugs, like that was great to me. But then I moved on to working in recovery, man, to working in a treatment center as a RA, a residential assistant, man, like a recovery coach. And it's like I got to talk to these guys, and my wife said, "Won't you go back to school, man?" Like before, I told you I didn't have no education. I dropped out of school, and once you get your GED, and I got my GED, I was able to get a GED, and I was like elephant elated, as my buddy would say all the time. I was happy about it. I was like, I got a GED, and then my wife said, "Won't you go to college?" And I'm like, "College, man, I can't do college." And I've learned to take that word out of my vocabulary. I can't. Because the impossible is possible with God. As long as I'm serving God, nothing can come against me. Nothing's greater than Him. And I said, all right, let's do it. And it's called faith, man. Like having faith in God that He's going to see me through this. And I currently have a associate's degree working on my bachelor's degree in social work. You know, like this addict that was tore out the frame, didn't know how to live life at all. I didn't even know how to pay an electric bill. I didn't know how to pay a bill. And now I'm going to college and having to be a bachelor, to be a licensed social worker. It is amazing to me, right? So that's all the material things. But as I go on, I want to talk about the internal feeling that was changed, the open heart surgery. My wife was very involved with that because she loved me all the time. I had to live with her. So she's seen all my defects, and she still loved me. And she loved Christ, and I loved Christ. And when I met her, I first seen her get baptized, and that's when I met her, and we became friends, and eventually we got married. And this woman has taught me faith, right? And life has taught me faith. Everything was going great. The first couple of years of my recovery, 3 or 4 years of my recovery, and stuff started to fall apart again. And I can be honest. I didn't use drugs. But I wasn't attending church. I wasn't reading my Bible. I wasn't praying. Because there's got to be a relationship with God. There's got to be a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I didn't have that relationship no more. And my mental health went out of whack. And I became a diabetic. And I asked God, why me? It was a big pity party. Why me? I'm doing good. I give to people. I help people. And this has to happen to me. And it took a while. It took a long time to get out of that. I used to hear God a lot. I would write in the mornings, and the one thing I always heard him say, he might not have said no big message, but he would always say, I love you. I love you, son. And I didn't hear that for a long time. And it was the devil again. It was the devil, the enemy. It was back getting inside of me. And he was trying to keep me bound in my mind, because he knew that he couldn't come at me with crack cocaine or heroin no more. It had to be something different. And that power was suggestion. That power that the devil has to suggest things. And he was putting stuff in my mind that didn't exist. And I started going crazy, in my mind, and doing these things that I wouldn't normally do. And so I sought help. And I went and seen a mental health specialist, and because I was hurting my family. I was damaging my family. I was harming my family for a long time. And I got some help, man. But the ultimate help was I started talking to God again. I started talking to God, just asking for that little prayer. Help me, God. It wasn't nothing big. It was just help me. I know you did it before. I know you can do it again. You did it with the disease of addiction. You can do it with my mental illness. I call it living as if, using the spiritual principle of faith. And I said, I know you can do this, God. And I started putting faith back in God. And I started to talk to God. I remember driving home from work, and I was talking to God, and I was real excited when I got home. I told my wife, I said, I heard God's voice. I heard him tell me, I love you, son. That's how I knew I was back on the right path. I was back on the right path, but I had been attending church, and I've been attending church not weekly like I should, but I get there to Open Door Church, great place. And God can do so much that I can't even explain. I wish I could explain God to you. I think we try through Face Dre tries. I think my buddy Rob tries, and Pastor Gray definitely tries. And A lot of my friends, that's what we do. We tell people about God and we tell people about Jesus every chance we can get, at the gas station, at the Kroger's, it don't matter where we're at. But we can't even explain his love to you. You got doubting Thomas in the Bible, and it's one of my favorite stories. And Jesus got hung on the cross and died, and the disciples came back to Thomas and said, "Hey, Jesus is alive," and he said, "You're crazy." But see, Thomas had to see it for himself, and the Bible says he had to touch his wound to believe. And see, I don't think he's a doubter, right? I think he had to have his own encounter with God. He couldn't live off the other disciples' faith. He had to have his own encounter, and that's the same thing with me. I had to have my own encounter with Jesus. I had to have my own encounter with the Holy Spirit to know what it was. I had to have my own encounter with God and my own relationship, and I got to continue this encounters because I need to see God. I need to hear God. I need God's guidance to guide my feet. He's the light unto my path, right? Like I need him. And I put my faith back in God. And so just recently in May, I had a heart attack. I had 100% blockage in my heart. I was all the way out at Tar Hollow Park, out 45 minutes in the woods. And I was sharing my recovery story, and it was a big event. And as soon as I got done sharing my recovery story, I started to feel sick, and my chest was hurting. I'm a diabetic, so I thought my sugar was dropping. And I went and got some cookies and some orange juice, and it didn't help. And I was sweating. I was sitting in the cooler because I was so hot. And one of my buddies found me. He said, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "I don't know. My chest hurts. I don't feel good." And he's like, "You want me to call the squad?" I'm like, "Yeah, go ahead and call the squad." And I had to use the restroom, and I got up, and I couldn't really walk real well. He was holding me up, and I had to hold the wall. And all these people were trying to help me. And squad came, and I was having a heart attack for about 2 hours before I got to the doctor, before I got to the Dina Hospital. And they told me I was having a heart attack, that 100% blockage in my heart. And before we left that room, my wife and my best friend, Sean Kaywood, was in that room. Sean was there to comfort my wife, because we didn't know if I was going to live or die. We didn't know what was going to go on. God chooses that. And I could see the concern on my wife's face and on Sean's face, and but this is the thing, I love God, and I know I love God. Before I left that room for surgery, I said, "Sean, you're going to pray." Because we pray before we do everything. We're going to pray to God. And when I left the room, I said, if I don't come back from surgery, just know I'm with Jesus. That's the ultimate goal. To live as Christ and to die as gain. I know today that I have eternal life when I leave this earth. That I'm going to be in comfort with the King, man. That I have a mansion waiting on me in heaven. That I got people waiting on me in heaven. I didn't tell you about my brother or my dad dying. Them both were men of faith. And I believe that the seeds that they put in me over the years, that it led to this moment with me sitting with Dre and telling you my story and telling you that God is real, that God is alive, that he's still doing miracles today, that he's still healing the blind, that he's still healing the lame, that he's still healing the drug addict, that he's still taking care of people that have heart attacks and cancer and depression and loneliness and the disease of addiction. He's still taking care of us. He's not an old God. He's all on time, all the time God. He's all omnipotent, man. He's all knowing. I don't even got to say all this. He knows my heart. He knows how I feel about him when I go to bed and when I wake up. See, that's what I want to happen. I want to be an earthquake shaker. I want to be a ground shaker. When I wake up, I want the devil to tremble and say, who is Matt going to talk to today? Who is Matt going to help today? Who is Matt going to pray for today? Because he didn't have to worry about me when I was in bondage of self. He didn't have to worry about me. I was already doing his work. But today the devil got to worry about me. And it's from not picking up drugs. It's funny that I stopped smoking crack and I stopped getting arrested. That was a jump start off rip. But Jesus, man, has saved me. I couldn't tell you how many times in my life. Growing up as a child, I had a hole in my esophagus, and I couldn't eat or drink. It was the first miracle Jesus ever did in my life. And I had to have surgery, and my grandpa was still alive then, and my grandpa was so afraid that something was going to happen because I was just a baby, and he prayed, and my dad prayed, and they was going to do surgery on me, and that hole is healed up. They didn't have to do surgery on me. And that was as a child, and I've been stabbed, and the nurse said, if you would have been a little bit lighter, your organs would have got cut open. But that was God, that was God saving my life. I've OD'd 6 times and woke back up, and God breathed right in my nose and woke me right back up. These are the times where I didn't know that God was with me. My elbow that had an infection, it was from metal being in my arm and from where I was shooting heroin, it gave me an infection, and I didn't have a piece of bone in there, and the bone grew back. It's just amazing, these miracles that happen. And I just look around all the time and you see God. You see a smile on a kid's face at Christmas time. That's God, man. You see a family happy on vacation, man, that's God. You see somebody with a mental health imbalance walk into an office and ask for help, that's God. You see somebody walk into a treatment center to get help and say, I need help, that's God. You see a person with a flat tire and they get a new tire on their car, that's God. God is working, man, and you just got to see it in the small things, not these big miracles, but in the small things. Right now, one of my best friends just went to treatment. He was my friend. He's been my friend since we was 10 years old. We bowled together, and one day he messaged me and he said, I need help. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. He seen I was doing good, but that's not me. If it was up to me, I would still be using drugs. God did that. I don't want to take no credit for what God did. It's not me. And I want people to know that. I want people to know that when they go get help, it's not nobody that's helping them. It's God that's helping them. We're just vessels. We're just messengers. God does the miracle. We're just people trying to live another day to serve a great God. One of my favorite stories is the footprints in the sand. God's carrying us. We definitely ain't carrying him. And I've learned over this 7 years, man, of recovery and serving the Lord, that God is not small, man. God is huge. That he is not a God that we put in a box, that we can do anything. Another miracle that has been happening in my life is my wife is going to get her master's degree. And it works. And my mother, man, thank God for my mother. I said earlier in my story, she wasn't a Christian. She didn't go to church. My father died, and then my brother passed away a few years after that, and she didn't have nothing left. There wasn't nothing left. Her oldest son died, and she was watching her youngest son die, and she didn't know what to do, and she turned to Jesus. And when she turned to Jesus, stuff changed. You know, they say another person's testimony can change somebody else's life. My mom's testimony, when she had never gave her testimony, and she gave her testimony, and 3 days later, I was sitting in a treatment center, and I've never used again. I've told my mother many times that I was going to stop getting high. When she gave her testimony, 3 days later, I was sitting in Portsmouth, Ohio in a treatment center, and I've never ever used a drug again. As a woman of faith, she prayed for 11 years for me to get clean. And I truly believe prayers of a mother are different from anybody else's. I just truly believe it. Prayers from a child are the best prayers. I love them. When I'm around children, I had pain in my leg one time. And my friend Brenda, her daughter is amazing and she loves Jesus. And every time I would see her, I'd say, put your hands on my leg and pray. Because the faith of a child is big. That's all they know. You tell them Santa's real and they think it's real. So it's like if they grow up in church and praying, that's what they believe. You know, and it's crazy. It's crazy how my life is. And I just give it to God. Like it's all credit is to God. There's no other credit to give. And the people that are around me, Pastor J. Troy Gray, I'm real thankful for that man. I remember coming to church on Sundays, and I would hang on to every word he would say. And, he preaches faith. That's what he preaches, faith. You got to have faith. Know God is going to get you through this, that God has got you no matter what is going on in your life. And I hung on to that, and I still hang on to it, because there's always going to be trouble. The devil's always going to come and try to be sneaky and lie, and life's going to happen. You know, people are going to pass away, and crime's going to happen, and how we deal with it is we give it to God. It's not our war, it's His. It is His battle. It's not mine. And as long as I can turn my will over to God, to Jesus, you know, He's the way, the life, and the truth. The only way to get through to His Father is through Him. He's the gatekeeper. He's the one that came down here. And I don't know if you've ever watched movies or anything about that. Man, I can't even watch the crucifixion. It makes me cry. That man had to endure what he did to save my life. If I was the only person on earth, he'd have did it for me. And he'll do it for you too.